My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm a columnist in Brussels Morning, and I've just published an article there regarding SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, its imperial bearing, and its narcissistic vision. I'm not a legal analyst like the inimitable and profound Stephen Vladeck, but the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, is now a political institution. And so I feel qualified to make a few observations. I assume that my viewers are well acquainted of and petrified by recent developments. The Supreme Court seems to be predominantly concerned with the restoration of checks and balances in America's body politic. Over the decades, Congress has created a fourth estate, an independent technocracy, with both legislative and executive powers. The Supreme Court aims to strip away this independence and place these agencies firmly under the thumb of the President of the United States, the executive. The problem is, of course, that doing so without also taking away the legislative and executive prowess of these hitherto autonomous players would render the president a dictator in all but name. But wouldn't it revitalize Congress by forcing it to legislate? The conservative majority in SCOTUS would have you believe, vociferously and disingenuously protest, that this is exactly their agenda, even as they are stripping Congress of its power of the purse and handing it over to a triumphant president. Congress has been dead in the water for decades now. The Supreme Court justices seem to have accepted this ineluctable and irreversible reality, even as they pretend otherwise. The conservative majority in the Supreme Court all claim to be originalist and textualist, as their unconstitutional decision to grant the president immunity for all official acts and presumed immunity for unofficial ones, as this decision demonstrates, the claim to be an originalist or a textualist is only a fig leaf, regardless of the merits of the decision, and it has merits if the president is indeed the one man or one woman personification of the executive branch. It has merit, but regardless of the merits, it was not based, this decision was not based on any original text or its interpretation. Rather, narcissistically, the Supreme Court see an opportunity here to team up with a unitary executive and share with him or her absolute power. To that aim, they're also crippling the rest of the judiciary in a variety of ways, making sure that the Supreme Court is the only game in Law Town. The alternative is to push back against illegal and unconstitutional power grabs by the executive, and then be defied. A defiance which would expose the irrelevance and impotence of the Supreme Court, devoid as it is of either the power of the purse or the use of the sword. But aren't the conservative justices concerned about the future of democracy in the United States? Of course they are. They want to make sure that Democrats will never again attain political national power. They share the worldview of the Republicans, and especially the MAGA base, by regarding the Democratic Party and the liberal progressive agenda of said party as detrimental to the future and the cohesion of the country. They regard the Democratic Party and the liberal progressive agenda as clear and present dangers, the enemy that had already breached the communal gates. So by now the vision and agenda are pretty clear in my view. A one-party polity, a one-party country, the only party being the Republican one, of course, with a power-sharing agreement between an autocratic president, a dictator basically, and a self-indulgent, self-congratulatory Supreme Court. That's the basic idea. That's the plan. If at any point in time Congress revives, it would be welcome to join the fray in a legislative capacity, having first ascertained that it would be forever controlled by the Republican Party and its values and beliefs. This is a model very reminiscent of China or Russia, with one minor tweak: an active, potent Supreme Court. Of course, needless to say, the justices are deluding themselves. Sooner or later, an imperial president would shunt them aside, render them obsolete, perhaps by tampering with the court or by packing it with loyalists. See, for example, the experience with Erdogan in Turkey and Viktor Orban in Hungary. The United States is inexorably headed to a dictatorship, which would last for decades, if not longer. And the Supreme Court have made and are still making this happen. My name is Sam Wagner. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Evaluating the mental health of a public figure requires an inordinate amount of research. Over the past 5 years, I have watched well over 600 hours of Donald Trump in various settings. I have read everything he has written and everything he was quoted as saying. I have no such in-depth acquaintance with other candidates like Hillary Clinton. By now I'm convinced that Trump is a malignant narcissist. This view is shared by dozens of mental health professionals who went on public record with their analysis of his mental infirmity. Trump is dangerous, antisocial, destructive, vindictive, sadistic, and hypervigilant. He is hypersensitive and a bit paranoid. Trump regards himself as omniscient. In other words, he knows it all. He is all-knowing. He is an authority on anything and everything, from aesthetics to ethics. Trump lacks intellectual curiosity, simply because he knows everything. Why would he be curious, and what would he be curious about? He regards outside advice as both superfluous and injurious. Accepting advice implies that you are less than perfect, and Trump is perfect. Trump is likely to surround himself with timid yes-men and sycophantic acolytes. He is likely to generate an impregnable echo chamber rather than a council of wise men and women. Trump's grasp of nuanced reality is already very weak, but it is likely to deteriorate further to the point of paranoid psychosis. Faced with opposition, however tenuous, Trump is likely to react by scapegoating and by inciting street or state violence against targeted groups and individuals. Trump is the state, so his enemies, in other words, anyone who as much as voices doubt or disagrees with him, that's his enemies by definition are enemies of the state, because he is the state. Owing to his self-perceived innate superiority, Trump regards himself as above and transcending laws made by lesser mortals. Laws are meant to trap and ensnare giants like him, to drag him down to the pedestrian level of mediocrity. Trump plays by the rules only when and only if they accord with his predilections and especially his self-interest. Like all narcissists, Trump believes that he is universally loved, adored, and admired. He attributes this ostensible and utterly delusional blanket approbation to his effusive charm and his irresistibility. He is firmly convinced that he can motivate people to transgress against their own moral convictions and to break the law if necessary. How is he going to do that? By the sheer force of his monumental personality. Trump idealizes and then rapidly devalues people, collectives, and institutions. Trump is in sempiternal flux. He is inconstant in his judgments, inconstant in his opinions, views, and his fleeting attachments. Trump is intellectually lazy, so he is a firm adherent of shortcuts and of fake it till you make it. It is a dangerous approach that led him to botch numerous business deals and to inflict untold damage and suffering on thousands of people. Trump is authoritarian in the worst sense of the word. In his disordered, chaotic mind, Trump believes that he is infallible, incapable of erring, incapable of making mistakes. He believes that he is omnipotent, all-powerful, can achieve anything if he just sets his mind to it. He believes that he is omniscient. He needs to learn nothing, as he is the fount of all true intuitive knowledge and wisdom. These tendencies to regard oneself as infallible, as omniscient and omnipotent, these tendencies preclude any proper team work, any orderly governance, any institutional capacity, any flow of authority and responsibility, any structure, to put it plainly. Trump is an artist. He is led by inconsistent and intermittent inspiration, not by reliable, old-fashioned perspiration. He is not a self-made man, as he likes to present himself. Trump is a self-conjured caricature of a self-made man. Trump is guided by his alleged inner divine wisdom. He is a malevolent guru and cult leader, not a politician or a statesman. Ironically, Trump's much-trumpeted grandiosity is fragile because it is based on delusional and fantastic assumptions of perfection and intellectual brilliance, and these assumptions are very hard to defend. Trump's relentless and compulsive pursuit of affirmation and adulation of narcissistic supply is his way of buttressing his grandiose fantasies, which otherwise are indefensible. Trump needs to constantly be idolized just to feel half human. Criticism and disagreement, however minor, however well-intentioned, are perceived by Trump as unmitigated threats to the precarious house of cards that is his personality. Consequently, Trump is sadistically vindictive, aiming not just to counter such countervailing opinions regarding his godlike status, but to deter and intimidate future critics and hopefully ruin them for good. Finally, aiming to disavow his own fragility and the indisputable fact that his public persona is nothing but a fabrication, Trump ostentatiously and volubly abhors and berates the weak, the meek, losers, haters, of which he's a prime example, the disabled, women, minorities, and anyone else who might remind him by their very existence of how far from perfect and brilliant he is. The public Trump is about hatred, resentment, rage, envy, and other negative emotions, because he is mercilessly driven by these very demons internally. Trump's quotidian existence is a Kafkaesque trial in which he stands accused of being a mere average, not too bright, mortal and individual. In this trial, Trump is constantly found wanting and guilty as charged. His entire life is a desperate, last-ditch attempt to prove wrong the prosecution in this never-ending courtroom drama, which is Donald Trump's soul. My name is Sam Vaknin, and I am the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. The Trump Revolution. The supporters and fans of Donald J. Trump are frustrated. In 1939, a team of psychologists, led by John Dollard, hypothesized that frustration always leads to aggression. Legitimate grievances against a dysfunctional, corrupt, and compromised polity, a deceptive ethos, an American dream turned nightmare, a broken system that no longer works for the overwhelming majority and appears to be unfixable. All these lead Trump's base to feel that they had been betrayed, abandoned, duped, exploited, abused, ignored, disenfranchised, and trampled upon. They are in the throes of dislocation, disorientation, and trauma. The declining fortunes of the people who support Trump, their obsolete skills, render them insignificant and irrelevant, and their lives meaningless. It is hopelessness, coupled with impotent helplessness, that is the engine behind Trump's ascension. Trump's adulators seek to bypass the system and even to dismantle it altogether. They don't want to reform it. They want it gone. This is the stuff revolutions are made of, and the pronouncements of Trump's cohorts are inadvertently copy-pasted from the texts of the French Revolution, the October Revolution, which led to Bolshevism, and even the Nazi Revolution. Such conditions often give rise to cults centered around a narcissistic or psychopathic leader figurehead. In Trump, the abyss between his life's circumstances and his followers is unbridgeable, and yet they hope that by associating with him, however remotely, some of his glamour and magical fairy tale success will rub off on them. Voting for Trump is like winning the lottery, becoming a part of a juggernaut and of history. It is an intoxicating sensation of empowerment that Trump encourages by telling his voters that they are no longer average, that they are now, by virtue of following him, great and special, even if only by proxy and vicariously. Trump idealizes his voters, condescendingly, but still idealizes them, and they return the favor. In their eyes, he is the cleanser of the Beltway's Augean stables. He, single-handedly, in 10 minutes, in his words, will destroy their ancien regime, the old order, of which he had been a part since age 21, may I remind you. He, the Trump, will settle scores, Dirty Harry style, and thus make their day. It is a nihilistic mindset. Some of his followers gleefully contemplate the suspension of the Constitution and its elaborate checks and balances. Others discuss openly and fervently and hopefully a war with China and Russia. Yet some others compare him to the first Roman emperors. These people behind Trump wish to unburden themselves by transferring their decision-making and responsibilities onto the chosen one, the great leader. To his acolytes, and contrary to much evidence, Trump is a doer with a long list of mostly illusory accomplishments. He is best equipped to get things done and to prioritize, they say. In Washington, where appearances matter far more than substance, no one is better credentialed than the Donald, they smirk. These champions of small government and conservatism look to Trump when president, in other words, they look to the state, to generate jobs, to insulate them from the outside world, to protect them from illegal aliens and terrorists, surely one and the same, and in general to nanny and cosset them all the way to the bank. The world, they say, is a hostile, psychopathic place, and who best to deal with it than an even more hostile, narcissistic leader like Trump? We need a bad big wolf to navigate through the jungle out there, they exclaim. And this is a form of collective regression to toddlerhood, with Trump in the role of the omnipotent, omniscient father. In abnormal psychology, this is called shared psychosis. The members of the cult deploy a host of primitive, infantile, psychological defense mechanisms as they gradually dwindle into mere extensions and reflections of their skipper. Theirs is a malignant optimism, grounded not in reality, but in idealization, a tendency to interact not with Trump himself, but with an imaginary Trump that each fan tailors to suit his or her fears, hopes, wishes, and fervent fantasies. And then there is, of course, denial, pathological response, the repression of inconvenient truths about Trump and their relegation to the unconscious, where they fester into something called dissonance. Dissonance breeds rage and violence, and these oft accompany nihilistic and destructive political cults. Denial goes well with splitting, the demonization and denigration of opponents and adversaries, critics and bystanders, and sometimes innocent interlocutors. If you are not 100% with us, you are 1000% against us. And if you are against us, you are the enemy, to be sucker punched and carried out on a stretcher. Trump's words. One such fantasy Trump actively encourages is that he is just acting to the crowds now. His below-the-belt obnoxiousness is just for show. In a feat of rationalization worthy of Houdini, Trump's legions attribute his crass boorishness to market research and reasoned electoral calculus. Once elected, he will miraculously be transformed into a presidential and dignified politician who plays by the rules and is by no means buffoonish, vulgar, and offensive. These people insist with a knowing wink, as though they have ever truly been in the know, as though they are pals and buddies with the great man himself. Such intimations of arcane knowledge cater to their growing sense of self-importance. Indeed, Trump's may well be the first postmodern narcissistic mass movement. Such admirable thespian skills, a tribute to Trump and proudly owned by him, required the inbred personality of a consummate and thoroughly psychopathic con artist. Narcissists effect these transitions between different selves and different guises and different masks and different personas effortlessly. And this is precisely because they have only a false self, no true self. They only have a confabulated, grandiose image that they project and which has very little to do with reality. The sole aim of the false self is to garner narcissistic supply, attention, if possible, unmitigated admiration and adulation, power, money. Faking it is second nature to the narcissist. Exaggerating, lying, pretending, shape-shifting, zealot-like, chameleons, whatever it takes, everything is negotiable. Another fantasy is that the narcissist will never turn against his own people. Trump will mercilessly crush the coterie of corrupt power brokers in Washington, but will never ever direct the full might of his gratuitous sadism against his own followers, fans, ardent supporters, and fawning admirers. So they say. History, of course, teaches otherwise. Sooner or later, the narcissist cannibalizes his own power base and treats as enemies his most rabid lackeys and toadies. People shrug and say, but ain't all politicians narcissistic? So what? Who cares? Well, the answer is a resounding no. Not all politicians are narcissists, malignant narcissists. Many of them are narcissistic, but not all of them are malignant narcissists. Granted, it would be safe to assume that most politicians have narcissistic traits. But as the great psychologist Theodore Millon observed, there is a world of difference between being possessed of a narcissistic style and being a full-fledged, malignant, dangerous, destructive narcissism. The famous author Scott Peck suggested that narcissism may just be a modern-day fancy byword for evil. He said that narcissism is another word for evil. Scott Peck may have had a point, but evil should be contained and eradicated, not elevated to the position of the free leader of the free world. In 2008, I was the first to suggest that Barack Obama has narcissistic personality disorder. Then, in March 2016, I granted an interview to American Thinker, a conservative online publication, as right can get, not progressive, not liberal, not democratic, super Republican, almost alt-right. The interview was published, and I was the first ever to suggest that Donald Trump suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. March 2016, Google online, Vaknin, American Thinker. Every time I mention Donald Trump's name in any of my videos, I get an avalanche of commentary. Don't mix politics in your lectures. Politics has no place in psychology. Politics has no place in therapy. Right? Wrong. Imagine if I were living in the 1930s in Germany and I were to write a series of articles, because there was no YouTube at the time. If I were to write a series of articles about Adolf Hitler, claiming that in my professional opinion, he's a narcissist and a psychopath, you can imagine the avalanche of correspondence from Nazi sympathizers, castigating me, chastising me, and criticizing me for mixing my profession with politics. And yet, in the 1930s, intellectuals have failed to do exactly this. They failed to sound the alarm regarding this extremely dangerous leader. They failed to alert the public that Adolf Hitler is mentally ill. I don't want to repeat this mistake. I have an obligation to my profession, to my conscience, and to you, my public, to alert you to the fact, substantiated by my work and the work and opinions of thousands of other psychologists, including the niece of Donald Trump. We have all been warning you that Donald Trump is not well mentally, that he is in all likelihood a narcissist, whether he is a malignant narcissist, whether he is a covert narcissist, which he is not, I think, whether he is overt, that's besides the point. He has not been diagnosed formally by anyone. But that he is a narcissist, there is extremely little doubt in the minds of anyone who knows narcissism. Do we have an obligation to warn you against narcissists? Of course. What are all these YouTube channels for? We are warning you against narcissists. We're telling you don't date narcissists. Don't get married to narcissists. Don't have children to narcissists. And yes, do not vote for narcissists. Because narcissists are sick in the head. They have cognitive distortions. They misperceive reality. They falsify everything to buttress the grandiosity. They have no empathy. They abuse, exploit, and utilize people. They are malevolent on multiple occasions. They are vengeful. They are sadistic. They are dangerous. They're dangerous to you and to themselves. Narcissists should never attain power. They should never hold office. In a law-based society, a proper civilization, people would be subjected to psychological assessment before being eligible to pose as candidates. Anyone who wants to have a public office would have to be tested extensively for personality disorders and other mental health issues. So it is regrettable that in our so-called democracies people like Donald Trump can rise to the top. But wait a minute, you say. Donald Trump is not Adolf Hitler. Isn't this going over the top? Of course he's not Adolf Hitler. He's in the United States, where it's extremely difficult to become Adolf Hitler. Germany had a 20-year democracy, the Weimar Republic, and that's the only reason Hitler succeeded to upend it and become a dictator, a Führer. Donald Trump is unlucky in this sense, but had Donald Trump lived in a different America, of course he would have become an Adolf Hitler. I have not the beginning of the slightest doubt about this. And mind you, I know a thing or two about narcissistic personality disorder, both personally and professionally. I've contributed a lot to the field. And I'm telling you, this man is not well. He belongs in an institution and it's not the White House. Do I have a moral obligation to tell you this? Of course. Am I afraid of you, my public? Never. Never. My allegiance is to the truth and to the principles of my profession. Yes, but you say, your profession prohibits you from diagnosing people remotely without interviewing them and subjecting them to medical tests and without their consent. True, that's the Goldwater rule, Article 7. But the Goldwater rule, which applies to public figures, is antiquated and wrong. Not all rules are right. This particular rule is idiotic. The extent of information available about Donald Trump is such that it exceeds anything we can ever know about any other patient. We have enough information to decide on and to diagnose him with absolute certainty and safety. And so I have no hesitation to tell you that the man is a narcissist. I'm just not sure whether there is a psychopathic narcissist. That I have my doubts, but he is a narcissist for sure. Grandiose, exploitative, disempathic, problems with intimacy. But you say, hold it, he has a family, they love him. It's easy to love someone with $2 or $3 or $4 billion. And it's easy to succumb to an authoritative dictatorial father who wouldn't brook any dissent. It's easy to hang to the coattails of a successful man. It makes it easier to love him. Are his family as mentally ill as he is? Time will tell. That I don't know. There is insufficient information there. But there is an abundance of information regarding this utterly horrible, ignorant, stupid man, Donald Trump. And this is not to mention his conflicted relationship with the truth, with women, with minorities. The man is a menace, as had been proven during the COVID pandemic. He is a menace to himself. He is a menace to the collective, which he purportedly leads, and he's a menace to the world at large. That he had not inflicted more damage than he had in the first 4 years is a miracle and a tribute to cooler heads around him. He is impetuous, he lacks impulse control, he is defiant, and he is reckless. Good grounds to assume that he is also a psychopath. You have been warned. Do not complain afterwards that the therapists and the psychologists did not tell you in advance the price you're going to pay should you re-elect this travesty of a human being.